Way back when, if you got a book on business, even if it was a book on leadership, it would be all about strategies and methods. But recently, there have been some excellent books that really point to the human dimension. Really talk about, what's required of a leader to be successful. And I'd like to talk about some of those books and talk to them, what I'm suggesting at a deeper level, from the viewpoint of the principles, is what gives an even greater understanding of what's being said in these books about the human dimension. So one of the books I'd like to start with and spend the most time on is a book called How the Mighty Fail. And it's a book by Jim Collins, who also wrote Good to Great. And in his book, he talks about the stages of deterioration in businesses. And he basically says, which I don't think is necessarily true, but he basically says that every business is subject to this kind of deterioration. And his book is all about how that deterioration happens and what can be done about it. But I'd like to go over the stages that he talks about in the deterioration of businesses and the leadership and what leadership has to do with it, and give you a whole different perspective on it. And then I'm going to talk about some of the other books. So the stages that he sees are that success goes to the head of the business. He calls it hubris. That people get arrogant. And then the next thing that happens is, out of their arrogance, they grow too much. They expand too much. Because they're overly confident about what they're doing. And then the third thing that happens is, when things start to go wrong because of their too much expansion and the bad decisions they make, they go into denial. They ignore the warning signs. Then, when they finally see the warning signs and see that the business is in trouble, they grasp for quick fixes. Instead of really going back to the drawing board and seeing what would work, they just, grab at the lowest hanging fruit. And then the final stage, and the stage that he feels is the most difficult, is despair, giving up. The people just get disheartened and give up. Now, here's an interesting thing about those stages. If you didn't interview the people, if you just looked at their behavior, looked at what they did, how they behaved, you could see all those stages in a very different light. For example, the success going to their head could look like confidence, passion. The person is very confident and very passionate about what they're doing. The more growth, more growth in could look like boldness, being opportunistic, so that they have this confidence and they see these opportunities and they go out and pursue them. The denial, ignoring the warning signs, is the same, looks like from the outside, the same behavior of a businessman who is exclusively focused on objectives. A leader is focused on objectives. They're intentionally ignoring some of the things that aren't going right, and they're just focused on what they're trying to do. And people looking at them would say, oh, they're in denial. They're not really in denial. They're just keeping their attention in the right place. The grasping for quick fixes, which Collins it gives examples of people who, make, structural changes and put in, emergency incentive plans and stuff like that. When viewed from a distance, that can look like the person sees, as kind of blowing up the old organization, which he thinks is a good way to go sometimes, and going back to the drawing board and doing something new. So the behavior itself, it can look either way. And then the last thing, the despair, the giving up, can appear like humility. The person is surrendering to the fact that what they're doing isn't working, and says, look, we have to go all the way back to the drawing board and start all over here. We've been very humbled by our failure here. Now, the reason I'm creating this dichotomy is because the answer is not in the behaviors. The behaviors on the left are products of an insecure mind. So when people get insecure, which happens to everybody, and they think out of that insecurity, and they act out of their insecurity, they contribute to all these stages. They create all these stages. They get egotistical as a result of their success. They lose their grasp of reality. They don't have any reflection. They don't step back and take a look. They're just full speed ahead. If they're insecure, they're going to go into denial. They're going to be desperate, frantic and frenetic about fixes, and they're going to, at some point, give up and become despairing. Now, those are the products of an insecure mind. Okay? Now, if a person has their well-being, has their bearings, stays secure, they're going to have very similar behaviors, but it's going to be a very different result, because they're going to have a healthy confidence. They're going to be bold and look for opportunities. They're going to, avoid the landmines of negative thinking, which looks like denial, but is actually a person keeping focused. They're going to be looking to get a fresh start. And they're going to have humility as things get worse, and the humility will give them a platform for improving things. So I'm saying that insecurity and security and well-being are alternative platforms. Imagine that it's a platform that you're working from, okay? And this platform, the platform of well-being makes everything turn out good. You're more reflective, you're more resourceful, you're more realistic, you're secure enough to look a difficulty in the face. That platform, you have everything going for you to exercise good leadership. The insecurity platform, you have everything going against you. You're too insecure to look at things that aren't going right. Your insecurity leads you to try to prove yourself and get into your ego, and you become self-absorbed in that. Everything goes well with a good platform, and everything goes badly with a bad platform. Okay? Now, as I said earlier, everybody, it's a relative thing. Everybody loses their bearings now and again. Everybody can look back in their life and see that their platform wasn't very good at some point, and look back and see their platform was very good. So it's not like some people have a good one, some people have a bad one. It's all relative. And even the insecure platform is done out of innocence. It's not like the person is just a bad leader and they don't care. What happens to people is they're doing fine, they have a good platform of well-being, and then thoughts get into their head. They get thoughts of all the way the world is changing, and maybe the economy isn't doing very well, or there have been some mistakes that are made, and they start thinking about them. It lowers their spirits. They lose an important employee, it throws them for a loop. So people go through life and they lose their bearings as a result of their thinking and what they're thinking about and how they're thinking about it. If they don't recognize that that's happening, they operate off that platform, and that's how the mighty fall. Okay? If a person gains more understanding about how human psychology works and our relationship to our own psychology, they're going to be resilient. They're not going to get knocked off their well-being as easily, so that they maintain a good platform. And when they do, they'll recognize it. And as soon as they recognize it, it'll move them back in that direction. The problem really with these companies is the leaders don't even recognize that they're operating off a bad platform. Now, the other business books I wanted to reference was Good to Great and Leading Change and The Heart of Change and Bounce. And I'm going to talk about them in the same context. That John Cotter's book on leading change had all these stages in there where you get people behind it, and then you make goals that give you a sense of accomplishment. There's a whole list of stages. In his second book, which is The Heart of Change, in a nice way, he says, look, these are case histories, and the more I look at it, the more I see that it's not so much the stages, it's where the person's head is that's going through those stages. And he talks about how if your well-being, he calls it feelings, isn't intact, you're not going to be able to do these stages, period. End of story. If your well-being is intact and you have the right feelings, you can help other people to have those feelings of well-being. And if you can't help them to have those feelings of well-being, it's going to shoot you in the foot when you try to go through these stages. So he's now saying, yeah, you're going to go through those stages, but your success has everything to do with the feeling state of the leader. And there's not power in the stages themselves, except as it's brought to those stages. The feelings are brought to those stages. The same thing with Bounce. You know, the most powerful point in that book is that the success of leaders depends on their relationship to adversity. How do they respond to adversity? Do they bounce back or do they get buried? Again, it's a matter of security and insecurity. From an insecure state, people get knocked for a loop. From a secure state, people keep their bearings, see opportunities, see where to go from here, and they see lights at end of tunnels, and that keeps them buoyant. So the whole issue of it's resilience. And the more understanding you have of the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, the more understanding you gain, the more you realize it, the more resilient you're going to be, and the more you're going to respond well to adversity, because you're going to keep your bearings. As long as you have that platform of well-being, everything's going to go your way as a leader. I know Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, talks about the qualities of a leader, the qualities of a level 5 leader. You know, reflectiveness, their ability to be humble, to step back and reflect, their ability to, have a positive influence on other people. Everything he mentions, every single thing he mentions, are qualities that are present in a person when they have their bearings and they're in a state of well-being. Okay? And the opposite qualities would be present in someone who's gotten insecure and lost their bearings. Now, that is the purpose of the courses that we teach, during which we teach the principles, is the more people hear, the more they relate to it, the more they realize it, the more resilient they are, the more easy it is for them to keep their bearings, even in the face of adversity. And the quicker they recognize it when they've lost their bearings, and as a result, the quicker they recover. So the leadership, the power behind all these leadership books that I've looked at is, what platform are you operating from within your own mind? If you're operating from strength, well-being, it's going to work out well. You're going to be an effective leader. If you're operating from insecurity, from weakness, you're not. Nobody can. Nobody can operate from insecurity and do well. They just don't have the thoughts. They don't have the right feelings. They don't have anything going for them. And everybody has their moments like that. But as you understand how the mind works, you'll be able to recognize, you'll see this in real time, and that will protect you from operating off of a bad platform.